Hello and welcome to another Showdown Breakdown. This one, revenge is in our hearts. Russell Wilson, after being shunned by King Donkey Pete Carroll to Denver, now returns to Seattle for the opening Monday night. Of course, schedule makers know what they're doing. Broncos, Seahawks, not exactly enticing, but for Russ Wilson, see how much revenge he has. I'm sure it will be a very popular game tonight. Anyways, Cody, how was your week one?
It was good. Break even on the main slate side. Showed up to cash without Travis Kelce. Ended up walking away unscathed. So I feel pretty good about that after week one. Ready for tonight's game. We had 250+ point total games to kick off the Showdown season, and 7-point spread and 43.5 point total for this one. Should be interesting.
You know, Dink texted me on Saturday and he said, do you ever worry that Cody's going to give himself a heart attack from watching these Nebraska games and we're going to have to replace him? And I thought for a second, and I don't really follow college football too closely, and I thought for a second, and I said, man, how would we replace Cody if he dies watching a Nebraska game? So I just want to put that out there. Don't kill yourself on these Nebraska games.
You know, I'm with everyone at ETR that I think fandom is, well, I guess except for Leone. I guess Leone's still a cheers for the laundry, but I've pretty much given up all of that. But I can't let Nebraska football go for some reason.
Yeah. Okay. Anyways, Gary, how was your week one?
It was okay. I was definitely in the red a bit in GPPs, as we tend to have many times throughout the season, but kind of maybe thinking I'll start playing cash because my cash reads were right on the money. So but who's to say? Cody, I forgot to mention Scott Frost firing with you yesterday. You doing okay? Did you contribute to the $15 million buyout? That's the other thing.
Definitely not after how week one Showdown went, but we move on from Scott Frost.
All right. Let's get into it here with this Showdown slate. We get into these spots a lot where one team everybody's excited about and the other team no one is excited about. Typically, it's on Thursday night when we get these really crappy offenses. But for a Monday night, sometimes you run into these spots. Also, Cody, how do you think from a macro perspective when one team just seems like they have all the best plays?
Yeah, I think this is where you're going to get into there's going to be a huge delta between your single entry /3 max /cash style games compared to the lotto, because everyone building with an optimizer with the lotto, you have to think through, is the fifth most optimal play from Seattle going to be rostered ahead of the second most optimal play from, or excuse me, the fifth most optimal play from Denver going to be rostered ahead of the second most optimal play from the Seattle? And in those situations, your brain wants to say yes, because you've got a 7-point favorite. No one's excited about the Geno Smith-led offense, but optimizers have a tough time accounting for that. So for people that aren't specifically setting that roster construction rule to force in 5, you don't see it nearly as much as you think you would in these type of games. Everyone's excited about Russ and Javonte and all of these guys that we'll get into here in a second. But my read is that the 5-1 roster construction that we've kind of talked about a little bit to start is going to be underutilized despite the 7-point spread and despite all of the good options seemingly coming from the Denver side. I think it's going to be underutilized in the large field stuff because optimizers just have a tough time accounting for it. But when you move on to like the single entry stuff, the smaller field stuff, and the more where more people are hand building, that's where you're going to see like the 5-1 really get outsized ownership. So I'm thinking through that tonight. But like just from a macro sense, I still think that like the 5-1 kind of extreme roster construction style looks really good, even with seemingly the best plays being on the Denver side.
Yeah, we have the 5-1 projected here for 16.8%, 5 Broncos, 1 Seahawks, 16.8%, way off of the 4-2 that I think will be the most common construction pretty clearly. I think, Gary, from the overarching question of the slate is how much they let Russ cook, because obviously that was the big thing in Seattle. Russ was one of the most accurate quarterbacks, one of the most efficient quarterbacks, was never really allowed to cook. And I don't think Nathaniel Hackett is some forward thinking, throw the ball, Andy Reid style. I think Nathaniel Hackett will be balanced most likely when he wants to and kind of play how the game goes. I think that in this game, though, do you believe the narrative that Nathaniel Hackett will allow Russ to come out and cook, to shove a middle finger to everybody in Seattle who said, oh, whenever we let Russ pass the ball 40 times, we lose, et cetera, et cetera? What do you think about the macro Broncos offense tonight, Gary?
I don't really buy into that narrative. I think, as much as Russ wants to go in and dominate week 1 against his old team, Hackett wants to, I think, come out and win his first game as coach. And I'm starting to get a little scared that Seattle might actually be in this game. I mean, so much public money on Denver. I think it was the most public side of the entire week or something like that from some of the stuff I was reading. So that always scares me a little bit. And, in Seattle, I would imagine Seattle has as much of a chip on their shoulder to try to make sure Russ doesn't get all high and heavy on his high horse as does Russ. So I think he's going to try to be balanced. He's got 2 really good running backs. I think we've all underrated Melvin Gordon at this point, who had, underlying metrics wise, had one of his best years last season. And I would imagine he's going to be pretty balanced. It doesn't mean that Russ won't throw more than he was for the majority of the time on Seattle, but I don't think it's just going to be like we're passing every, 80% of the time type of thing.
I think the other overarching question, Cody, is how bad do you think Geno Smith is? Because if you think Geno Smith is just total dust, can't do anything, then it's going to be really hard to play anyone. But I actually think Geno Smith is one of the better backup quarterbacks in the league, not starting quarterbacks, one of the better backup quarterbacks in the league. He has to be starting. I don't think he's incapable though. And so I was taking some DK Metcalf in round 6 and round 7 in season long. I was taking some Tyler Lockett was going in round 10, 11, 12 sometimes in season long. I was taking the dip on that. I think that most of Seattle stuff is going to have one of those 2. It's hard to get excited about any other Seahawks, which we'll talk about. But what do you think about the public perception of Geno Smith and how that interacts with the game tonight?
Yeah, I think there's a few concerns here. Is Geno Smith the player, and then you also have to talk about the offensive line and their woes. Obviously, they're one of Brandon Thorne's worst ranked offensive lines coming into the season, and then you have this loaded Denver secondary as well. I think all of those things playing in together. I mean, really small sample, obviously, but Geno just looked out of his element in the preseason, and you can blame a lot of that on Carroll. You can blame a lot of that on not having the skill position guys around him, but you're going to need a competent game out of him if you're going to get away from these 4-2, 5-1 style builds, which I think is possible. And as we get into it, Geno, they aggressively priced him down. I referred to it as the Ben DiNucci line in the article, kind of like the Mendoza line in baseball. 8,400 is as low as DraftKings is willing to go for quarterback pricing for starters. They got him priced at 8,600. Yeah. So it's aggressively low. And I think he projects pretty well at a median level. You just need him to come out and perform.
Right. I mean, that's a ridiculous price for a quarterback who's likely to play the full game with Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf as weapons. It's just a ridiculously low price for Showdown there at 8,600. Not saying Geno's good, but it's just a ridiculously low price. Anyways, let's talk about Russell Wilson. What do you think about Russell Wilson in captain tonight, Cody? And if you do play Russell Wilson in captain, how many of his pass catchers should you be pairing with him?
Yeah, one other macro takeaway with the kind of the Russell Wilson bloated price tag, and I think 11.8 is probably a little aggressively high on Russell Wilson the other direction, but I was going through ownership projections, and this is going to be a really easy slate to build for, I think, and I think it's going to be pretty stars and scrubs heavy with these guys up top, and then some of the cheap guys from Seattle down low. So that was kind of one of the big takeaways is we could see even more ownership funnel up here towards the top, and that would start obviously with Russell Wilson at 11.8 at captain. Totally okay with it. He's certainly not one of these true dual threat guys, but he is willing to run a little bit. And I think that this target tree is going to be a little bit condensed here in Denver, obviously with Tim Patrick out, with Greg Dulcich out. But I do think that there's enough to go around that you could get a captain Russell Wilson performance with 2 to 3 of his pass catchers. In that sense, you're tying up a lot of salary because, obviously you're thinking guys like Courtland Sutton, thinking guys like Jerry Jeudy, even Albert O. You don't have a real cheap guy that you can throw in there. 4,400 for KJ Hamler kind of being the lowest you would go. So you have to think through that situation too, that you're tying up a lot of salary with Russ doubles.
Yeah. My take is that Russ historically has been condensed. Maybe some of that was personnel based, but the personnel in Denver should be pretty condensed here. I'm not talking about the run game. I'm talking about the pass game. And so I'm more, I think, intrigued by Russ flex and one of his weapons in captain teams, but we'll certainly get to that. Gary, do you have any interest in Geno? Geno captain projection, we have only 4.6% owned. Does that intrigue you at all as a GPP bro play? I myself can't stomach Geno captain, but then again, I was the king GPP bro last year, no longer. So go ahead, Gary, on Geno.
I would intentionally get a couple percentage points over the field on Geno captain and not be excited about it, but just in the large field stuff. Similarly to what you just were saying about, maybe you prefer having Sutton or Jeudy in captain with Russ and flex. On a much less exciting version of that, I would much prefer getting Metcalf or Lockett in captain with Geno in flex. In this particular case, both those guys I think are going to get overlooked on this slate. Denver's got a really good secondary, but if they game script wise, yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. You basically fade the Rashad Penny of it all. You play some Travis Homer and you get one of those two receivers in the captain. And I think that can make sense enough, even in a 4-2 Broncos.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go to running back, where I think it starts to get really interesting. Obviously, one of the biggest fantasy stories of the offseason was, what is the split going to be between Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon? I think it's pretty clear Javonte is going to start. I think Javonte has a floor of 50%. I think that he has the upside to get 65, 70%, whereas Melvin Gordon, barring injury, is never getting more than 50% of the work. That's just the way I see it. I think that's the way the field likely sees it too. Now, Melvin Gordon getting 40, 45% of the work is still pretty valuable, and he's significantly less expensive than Javonte Williams, who is very, very, very expensive. I don't think that they're going to use Mike Boone at all. And so really we just have two running backs here on Denver. Cody, how do you think about handling this Javonte Melvin split for Showdown?
Yeah, your read was the exact same read that I had. I think that Javonte is the guy that they want to roll with. Obviously, Melvin Gordon's still going to be involved, but I think it starts as kind of a baseline of 50-50, and then we go from there depending on how much more Javonte Williams can steal away from Melvin. I will say that looking through the market's really excited about Javonte Williams coming into the season. That's carried over from best ball. He's projecting better across the industry than he is for us, and not that we're down on him by any means, but we just got a little bit more for Melvin Gordon. And I think that is a good situation to gain a little bit of leverage. If it does end up being closer to a true 50-50 split, or even 45-55, you have a $2,800 discount on Gordon. And I think he's going to be less owned. If he just runs hot on touchdown efficiency, it doesn't even need to be that close to a 50-50 split. If he's the one that falls in the end zone over Javonte, you get some nice leverage there. And then I feel like I've been touting this a lot on the show, but I like doubling them up, even at the expensive price tags. I would probably negatively correlate them, at least if one of them is at captain, but I have no issue, especially if you think this game gets out of hand where they are more run heavy, have no issue doubling them up in the flex at all.
I brought this back up to the top here because you can see Javonte's tails are just completely ridiculous. 35, 40 point games. Those were when Melvin Gordon missed last year. Javonte had that outrageous game, but still he has it in him. Melvin Gordon, you see way fatter here in the middle. And then I also wanted to bring it up, Gary, because these Rashad Penny games. I mean, these games at the end of last year were all outrageous out here. I mean, No one almost was more efficient than Rashad Penny down the stretch last year. We are expecting Kenneth Walker to miss this game. He is listed questionable. Anything on Denver running backs for you, Gary? And then go ahead on Rashad Penny.
Yeah, this is the easiest pure GPP leverage spot on the entire slate for me. I'm flipping Gordon and Javonte's ownership. I think it's really clear. It's week one. We have no idea what that split's going to really look like. I think historically coaches are way more prone to stick to their real splits early in the season. Fresh legs on both. Touchdowns can be fluky. Melvin Gordon's been efficient on the goal line in his career. It's just very clear to me. And you're getting all the salary savings. So yeah, I love Javonte as a player like anyone else does. But on this particular slate, I'm easily just flipping their ownerships. And I think you can get real leverage there. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think if the Broncos do perform and score 4 or 5 touchdowns, I think Javonte is really likely to be a big part of that. But I hear you in some game scripts where they only score, 21 points or something like that, and maybe Melvin is the one who happens to get the touchdowns, you're going to flip on ownership and on salary there. I think that's at least interesting for sure. And
yeah, I'm not fading Javonte. I want plenty of exposure, but I want more Melvin, and I think it's a great way to just get different from the field right after.
Yeah, and we have 57% projected ownership total for Javonte, 24 for Melvin. So what Gary is saying by flip it would be 57% Gordon and 24% Javonte. I think that's
roughly 50 and 25, something like that. I think it makes a lot of sense. On Penny, I like Penny in a vacuum. I said it on the top. I kind of think Seattle might be able to stay competitive in this game. Just from a motivation perspective, obviously I don't love their roster, and I faded it pretty much like the plague in best ball, though I was buying some of those dips on Lockett as well. But if you do want to play it where they are competitive in this game, I think Penny's a really good bet. We know Pete Carroll doesn't want to let Russ cook, let alone Geno cook. So I think he'll want to keep it on the ground. I don't know how efficient he'll be, but volume-wise, I think he'll get a ton of carries. So if you want to play it that way where Seattle's competitive, Penny's a very good play.
Yeah, I had my Ace Rothstein hat on for week one. I said that the Bears would beat the 49ers. Shout out to me, they did. I said the Texans would beat the Colts as a 7-point dog. They should have, but they tied. I didn't see this as a great spot for Seattle. I thought this was a spot that the Broncos can actually come out and play well, but home dogs in these nationally televised games have such a ridiculously strong historical record. And so I don't think it's crazy to think that Seattle can keep it close, as Gary said. And if they do, I mean, they just want to run the ball. I mean, that's why this whole thing went down with Russ Wilson and Brian Schottenheimer leaving a while ago. And it's just, they want to run the ball. If they keep this game close, it's going to be so much Rashad Penny. We also have Travis Homer projected as the passing down back, and DJ Dallas mixing in a little bit. Also, Cody, anything for you on Penny and the Seattle backfield?
Yeah, the Penny stuff I think is fantastic in single entry 3 max. Again, we're more of your opponents are going to be hand building their lineups. It's like the grossest play at his price tag with all of the guys around him. You talk about guys we'll get into next, Judy and Lockett, and guys that actually fit the game script a little bit better. Penny is a guy that like you would have to assume that they're at least in this game, or that Pete Carroll is just unwilling to abandon the run at some point in order to click on him. So I think awesome captain leverage on Rashad Penny. I actually do think, and we've got 12.9% projected ownership right now in Travis Homer, I think the field might gravitate a little bit more there just because of the notion that he is the true pass down back, that he'll be out there in those situations, and with them being 7-point dogs and seemingly not having a chance, then I think the field will gravitate there a little bit more. So I will be cautious of that situation as a whole. I did put in the article just kind of a max 1 for me on those two guys, but with them being 1,400 and 400 respectively in games where you think Seattle can put up points, I'm okay with having Rashad Penny plus one of those guys.
Yeah, I actually think Homer is ahead of DJ Dallas on pass downs pretty clearly. Dallas might mix in, generally breather back stuff for both of them, but I do think that Homer is more likely to be the pass down back. And so
I think in Denver 5-1s, Homer makes a ton of sense as the one Seattle guy. You're going to get the salary saver because you're spending up a lot on the Denver guys, and game script wise, it fits right in. So I like him in those.
All right, let's go to wide receiver here. I mean, I was mostly joking about the Bible narrative. With some stuff I wasn't, because when I was in Philly, I mean, it was real with Carson Wentz and him, being too close, according to some people, to players that were going to Bible study with him and stuff like that. But Courtland Sutton and Russell Wilson, the reports are obviously they're both religious dudes, as we've established for the Bible narrative. But also, like, all the reports from camp are like Courtland Sutton's been the guy. Courtland Sutton's been Russell Wilson's favorite target throughout camp. That doesn't mean that Jerry Jeudy hasn't played well in camp, but Courtland Sutton has clearly been the guy. He's $1,200 more expensive here. We have them 1 point apart. I feel like other people will have them further apart. If I had to bet, I would say Sutton will lead the Broncos in targets tonight. But I don't think it's like it's no worse than like 40% for Jeudy to lead the team in targets. And so I think it's pretty close. And because I'm a bit surprised that the ownership is coming in so tight. Any thoughts on that, Cody, and anything else with Broncos wide receivers?
Yeah, if you're a subscriber and read the article, you can see my brain kind of going through how I think the field is going to roster this situation as I'm writing the article. Because at first I was kind of getting the impression that like $9,400 versus $8,200 for Jeudy and Sutton, they're wide receiver 1A and B at worst. And I just think that the field will naturally take the savings, the $1,200 savings with Jeudy, and you're going to get this pay up to be contrarian discount with Courtland Sutton, and Judy's going to be pretty highly owned because of the discount. But then I like after looking at market projections, after looking at kind of industry consensus and where everyone's at, it seems like they're both going to come in pretty highly owned, both of them. So I don't feel great about one of them getting some big ownership discount at this point anymore. And I think if I had to guess that Jeudy might actually end up coming in a little bit higher, because I think you can do a little bit with that $1,200 savings. I know salary's not too constraining in this slate, but I think that you can do a little bit with those $1,200 savings. And I'm kind of with you. If I had to bet, I think that Courtland Sutton is the better side of a coin flip in terms of leading this team in targets tonight and throughout the year.
Yeah, and obviously Russ Wilson has a very good history of supporting two wideouts, and due to the Tim Patrick injury, Alberto we'll get to in a second. But yeah, I mean, I think Sutton and Jeudy can both have really good seasons there. We are projecting KJ Hamler in right now. He's coming off the ACL. I don't feel great about playing KJ Hamler. He is very cheap. We have him for just 20% ownership, 19% ownership. I don't feel great about playing KJ Hamler, but that could be another GPP bro play. But just like this was a main slate or something, or even a afternoon only slate with like 4 or 5 games on it, it'd be an easy cross out for me on KJ Hamler, even though shout out Penn State, due to him coming off the injury. Any of these secondary wideouts pique your interest, Gary?
Yeah, I mean, I'm into Hamler a little bit at 4,400 there. I mean, the thing with Russ is as much as he was able to produce, for Lockett and Metcalf both. It was very rare in super large fields that those guys were viable together. They had a floor together, but from a ceiling, it was very rare. So I don't know if it's going to play out that same way with Sutton and Judy, but I would definitely negatively correlate in the lotto, not only in the captain spot. I would negatively correlate them in general in the flex as well. And I know that might be getting a little bit too cute, but I also think it's a way to get a little different because I think a lot of people are just going to play the pure doubles. So, I prefer having one of them, but wouldn't obviously rule it out. I lean on the Sutton side, but I like Hamler. I mean, I think Hamler's a talented guy. Shout out Penn State, right?
Yes.
Exactly. But 4,400, obviously coming off the injury, it's a little bit risky, but I do like pairing him as the double instead of the two alphas, I think.
Yeah. Cody, if Hamler's limited at all, do you see any pass to some of these other dust balls on Denver getting in there? I know Montreal Washington created a bit of buzz in the preseason. I'm just trying to see if I don't play Sutton and Judy together, how can I get another receiver in here if I don't want to play Hamler?
Yeah, Hamler seems like the prototypical, wide receiver archetype that you need to watch ownership on. Like if we end up coming down a little bit closer to lock on him, I don't think 19.2% is getting me paid off enough with an ownership discount to really play into it. But he is that prototypical, like if he's coming in low owned, he's the guy that you're willing to embrace some of the variance and accept the zeros when he airballs just for those big eruption games. So if, we get 15, anywhere below 15%, I would feel pretty good about that. But it seems like if he is limited or for some reason doesn't suit up, be like the Montreal Washington / Tyree Cleveland guys that would end up getting in there. And those are guys that'll make the pool, assuming they're active. But I'm not going out of my way to roster them. It would just be one thing that I'm doing to try and get unique.
Yeah. All right. I think one of the bigger questions on the slate is at the tight end position because the Alberto usage in the preseason was scary. Alberto played deep into games when the starters weren't even playing. He played with backups a ton. We couldn't really figure out why. And I think, Silva speculated that it was because with a new staff, he needs to learn the offense. He needs to work on his blocking, which has been problematic at times. And so, I'm optimistic on Alberto. I think Alberto is an awesome talent, but I'm also prepared for Eric Seibert to play a ton in this game and everybody to be tilting their faces off. So we have 27% ownership on Alberto. I think that's a bet that I'm willing to make at 27%. If it gets much higher than that, I think I'd be a little bit scared on Albert. Oh, Gary, what do you think about this Seibert, Alberto situation? And as Cody mentioned, by the way, Greg Dulcich is indeed on IR.
Agreed. Yeah, I'm with you. The 27% doesn't scare me off right now. Where actually, to the extent where I kind of mentioned, I like a Hamler with one of the two alphas in a double with Russ. I think I might like Albert. The second most as the second piece of a double there. We're all bullish on his talent. Obviously, pops like crazy out of the PSM over here at ETR. So, I'm an Alberto fan. I wasn't getting too scared off by some of the narratives coming out of preseason. I know Evan wrote about it in matchups. That could just be them getting acclimated to a new system. I think that he's a really good showdown bet as a guy that, could easily score 2 touchdowns around the goal line. So
Nick points out that KJ Hamler did play for a quarter and a half in their last preseason game. Yeah. I mean, that's totally fair. And it seems like he's healthy, but they did list him questionable for this game. I was lower than a lot of people on KJ Hamler anyways, despite him going to Penn State. But yeah, he's certainly in play. I think Seibert at least is interesting. If you need the money, I don't think you need the money that much on this slate, but 200 for Seibert, he is a blocker, but like I could see him just like getting a touchdown, and like that might be all it takes at 200 to get there. The most ridiculous salary is Noah Fant, 6,200. I mean, where do they get off pricing Noah Fant at 6,200? The backup tight end to Will Dissly, aka Will Dustley. I do expect Will Dustley to outsnap Noah Fant in this game. We do have an under on Noah Fant that we bet. I think we bet under 34.5 yards in this game for Noah Fant. We just think that the role is going to go to Dustley over Fant. Now, I guess there's some pay up to be contrarian stuff here with Noah Fant. You pay 6,200. He's an athletic guy. I just don't see it, man. And maybe I'm not enough of a GPP bro, but I don't think I can play Noah Fant tonight at 6,200 and 15%. Cody, any interest there? Any more thoughts on tight end? Yeah,
this is a similar situation that Gary and I had last night with Cameron Brate, where I did the running bit last year where the guy is so bad that he's actually a good play, and Noah Fant is such a bad play on this slate that he's like actually a good play, but he's not a good play at 15.6% ownership. Like we need that to come way down. Well, I would much rather play KJ Hamler at 19% than Noah Fant at 15%. But I kind of echo your sentiment that it seems like by all indications, based on the offseason, as much as Fant played throughout the preseason, Dustley's got this 3-year, $24 million extension. It seems like they want to use him certainly in run blocking situations, and I'm sure he'll stay out there for some pass work as well. So, a split timeshare at tight end at best with Geno Smith at quarterback, you're 6,200 and you're 15% owned. Like, you got to pay me off with way less ownership if I'm going to play you at 6,200 in this game.
What do you think about Will Dissly? I mean, 800. We know Pete Carroll loves this dude. I think he's going to play more snaps than Fant. We can't really project Will Dissly for a lot of points because he's so bad at really everything except for being out there and blocking. So, but yeah, I think Will Dissly is at least in play. Any thoughts on him?
No, I love Will Dissly at this price tag with those other Seahawks guys that I think are more appealing from a base projection. You have Travis Homer, who we talked about. You have DJ Dallas, who we talked about. You have D. Eskridge, who is presumably the wide receiver 3. I think all of those guys will get played more than Dissly, and $800. You don't need much. He makes sense as a bring back in those 5-1 stacks as well. And I mean, it's Will Dissly. I don't assume the ownership's going to get steamed much past 4.5% in this game.
Yeah. All right. I'll ask the question I ask on every slate, Cody. Are kickers and defense in play on this slate? And if so, to what degree?
I didn't even look last night at the DST ownership on Tampa. I kind of thought that maybe with the offensive line concerns for Dallas that it might get a little bit outsized there, even with the 50.5 point total and a close spread. This game, we've got 32.1%. People love playing defenses in these spots when, you've got a bad offensive line, you've got bad quarterback play. It's a 7-point spread. They know the names on the defensive side of the ball. So Broncos are going to be 35+% owned, I would imagine. We got 6.8% captain ownership, which is egregious. Don't play them at captain at all. It's an awful play. But with all of that out of the way, if you're doing the 5-1 stuff like I am, it's been historically proven. It happens often that the fifth highest scoring player is more likely to be a DST from that side than another player from the other side. So in the 5-1s, I will be going out of my way to force in the Broncos DST, but outside of that, I think I'm kind of trying to get underneath that 32.1% projected ownership.
Okay. And kicker thoughts on this slate?
I'm just so done with kickers after what happened yesterday with 5 field goals or whatever it was. It was just unreal last week, yesterday. But it's the same situation. Lower total, but if they're the ones that end up getting there, teams get stopped near the goal line and they end up kicking field goals. Even in these lower total games, if it's the field goals that get that account for the production, obviously they're going to get there. It seems like ownership's pretty good. You're going to get paid off with a nice ownership discount on Jason Myers as well, and it wouldn't shock me to see the Seattle offense stall out in the red zone.
Yeah, I don't think the Broncos offense is anything. Broncos defense is anything special, but obviously Geno is very, very mistake prone and big mistake prone. Gary, any thoughts on kicker and defense? And then we can get in some questions that you guys have for a few minutes.
Yeah, I think if you're going to mash the field or go over the field on Russ, I would also want to have a good amount of McManus, probably in non-Russ lineups, but I think I'd want to hedge it out a little bit there. Just on the off chance that nerves get them, they're not efficient in actually converting, their drives into 6. And I just think, you're going to put so much equity into Russ probably in your builds tonight that it makes sense to do that.
Yep. Okay. We're going to go ahead and take some questions for the next few minutes here before we get to the flag plan. So we already addressed this, but we just reiterate for people, Cody, what do you think about playing Javonte and Melvin Gordon together in captain versus non-captain?
Curious Gary's take on this too, but I'm 100% okay with both of them in the flex, especially in the 5-1 style builds that we've been referencing. I think with one of them in captain, I would be negatively correlating, something you guys can do on Fantasy Labs, maybe in the other optimizers. I would negatively correlate the other one when one is in the captain.
I think for me, if Javonte was captain, I wouldn't put Melvin Gordon in my build at all. If Melvin Gordon was captain, I would negatively correlate Javonte in.
Okay. Yeah. David notes that Russ has never been a big tight end guy. A lot of the tight end data with quarterbacks and coaching stuff is just who was the tight end. It's hard to look at Russ's long-term tight end target numbers when he hardly had anyone. When he did have Jimmy Graham actually saw a decent amount of targets with Russell Wilson. So I wouldn't read too much into that. The bigger question to me is Alberto going to play a lot, and is he good? I think that, is he going to play a lot? I think yes. Is he good? I think yes, but it's a bit of a parlay on Alberto for sure. Nafal is asking about FanDuel. Yeah. So the reason that we don't talk about FanDuel as much in here is we don't think that the game on FanDuel is necessarily beatable. There's so many dupes. The way they have it set up where the MVP does not cost you more than the rest of your players, it's just really hard to beat and really hard to win. We don't really suggest people play the FanDuel single game. We don't think you can really win long-term in it. But if you want to play, I don't know if you've looked at this at all, Cody, if you want to play, any takes on the differences between DraftKings and FanDuel one-game slate?
Yeah, we're trying to talk about it a little bit more. There's a second problem there, is that I have all of the historical data from all the DraftKings, every DraftKings lineup ever made on a primetime showdown slate. Like I've got it. FanDuel is not so willing to give out those CSVs, so it's hard to kind of look at stuff from how the field has played this stuff historically.
Yeah. Let me just jump in real quick. In the 9 years that I've been playing DFS, you've always been able to download DraftKings CSV at lock. In other words, you can download once a contest starts on DraftKings, you can download it, see who everybody played, and Cody and his Virgin team can go through all the data and parse it all apart. Never has FanDuel allowed you to download a CSV. It's not possible. We have no idea. We can't look at the data. There's nothing. So I just wanted to put that out there. It's not us. This is FanDuel refusing to get with the times and give us CSVs. Anyways, go ahead, Cody.
In an effort to help everyone out that is playing on FanDuel, I know many of you are. The one macro takeaway is we've talked so much about trying to get unique with DraftKings. You have to be even more cognizant of your lineup when you're playing on FanDuel because of the issue that Adam mentioned. When you can just play the best play at captain and not have to worry about that 1.5x salary multiplier, everyone does it. So you're going to have a 40% owned Russ or whatever, and then everyone's going to jam in the best plays behind it that fit because you've got the salary available to do it. So if you are playing your Russ lineups, maybe you drop down from Sutton to KJ Hamler and just hope that KJ Hamler is the guy that falls into the end zone. Right. You have to do things that are less comfortable on FanDuel because of the salary situation over there. A couple of just like micro takeaways from looking at the salaries. Melvin Gordon looks like an awesome play over there. KJ Hamler is even more expensive, relatively speaking, on FanDuel. So if you want to get some KJ Hamler exposure, you're going to get paid off with a bigger ownership discount, I think, on FanDuel. So that would be where I would be willing to do it. And then similarly, like the quarterbacks look really good over there. They did add DSTs this year. So you have the same situation where you can play your Broncos DST in the Broncos heavy builds, but it's just a tougher game from the sense of like just trying to beat it.
Not Alex, Intrust Games wants me to give my Broncos country let's ride chant now that I live in Denver, buddy. It would be impossible for me to care less who wins the game tonight. Physically impossible.
Yeah, I mean, to me, Alberto seems really cheap on FanDuel. If you look at the guys he's around, he's right in between DJ Dallas and Travis Homer. I think from an upside case, that seems like a really good price.
Yeah. I know a lot of talk about this. Russell doesn't throw up the middle. Russell only throws wide. I know we have a pretty big sample on that. It could be related to how these guys were playing. I don't think that it means that Russ won't throw over the middle or won't throw to tight ends. I'm not sure I buy that narrative at all. But certainly if you do believe that narrative, it's better for Courtland Sutton than Jerry Jeudy, who's going to operate more in the middle of the field and more shorter. If the game score holds true, is a 3-3 lineup a better option? I'm not sure what he means by game score, but I guess he means if it really is a 6-point game, is 3-3 better? I don't think 3-3 is unviable. What do we have for 3-3 projected here? 29%. That's not bad for a 3-3. What do you think there, Cody?
Yeah, I agree with you on that. If it's, if Denver covers the 6.5, 7-point spread or whatever, and it's a 7-point game or it pushes, then, I think that you're going to get a situation where, because the salaries are cheaper on the Seattle guys, even if they lose by a touchdown, you could see 3 of them or more find an optimal lineup.
Will D. Eskridge have a role? We have D. Eskridge, I think, for like 3 points or something like that. Obviously, that's a mean, and his median is going to be way, way, way lower because he's like going to either catch one bomb or he's not. Yeah, we have him for 4.2 points, 13% ownership. I don't know, Gary, any thoughts on mixing in D. Eskridge?
Yeah, I think it's fine. It's not too dissimilar from kicking in the tight end twos of it all. I think he will be the next receiver out there for them. It's hard for me to get too excited about any of these Seattle guys where like, I'm actually kind of bullish on Metcalf and Lockett at their current ownerships. I'd be hard pressed to think that there'll be a lot of production outside of that, but all it takes is one random touchdown. I mean, we saw, those kind of bombs from Russ to like Freddie Swain, throughout his time in Seattle. Who knows if those kind of play calls will still be in the book for a D. Eskridge.
Yeah. By the way, Alex showing up with the data here. Russ is 15th out of 34 active quarterbacks at targeting tight ends with 1,000 or more pass attempts. So yeah. Yeah, Cody says Eskridge will get more carries than DJ Dallas. I think that's an interesting take. There definitely be some jet sweep stuff.
Oh, interesting.
With the Eskridge. If Lock plays tonight, Seattle is getting blown out. Yes, if you saw Drew Lock play in the preseason, I mean, as bad as Geno was, I think Seattle took a look at Drew Lock and was like, gave it the nah wave. So, I know some people like to play backup quarterbacks in Showdown. We don't recommend doing that at all, especially when it's Drew Lock.
Agreed.
Okay. All right. We said it all. It's time to flag the plants, to plant the flags. Gary, I'll let you go first if you're ready.
Yeah, I mean, I already talked about it from a GPP perspective and flipping the ownership, but I think Melvin Gordon makes a ton of sense for me on this. And as Cody mentioned, I think they both can get there. But when you see the difference in price and ownership with, everything we know about that split right now is speculative. I know Benjamin Albright's come out basically and said that he thinks it'll remain, pretty close. I wouldn't be surprised as the season goes on if it becomes a 60-40, even 65-35 in favor of Javonte, but I do not expect to see that out of the gate. I really like Melvin Gordon in this spot.
Okay, Melvin Gordon. Cody, go ahead.
You know what? I did something really similar to what I'm about to do last year early in a show when Dink was on, and I think I almost gave Dink a heart attack. And
I remember
the guy that I did. The content team clipped it up and made me look like a total idiot. So hopefully they don't do that again. Will Dissly is in the winning lineup tonight. He's the tight end one in Seattle. They're going to be in negative game script. Gino's going to have to throw. This defensive secondary for Denver can be pretty imposing. They might shut down Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. If that's the case, Will Dissly is going to make the optimal lineup.
Let's go.
Oh, baby. Will Dustley. Well, I'm going to have to balance it out here. Cody flag planted a total dust ball, Will Dustley. Gary flag planted the number 2 running back behind the second coming of Jesus with his Melvin Gordon. I am going with an actual good play and a good player. When you read through not just the Old Testament, but also the New Testament, and you're able to bond over the stories and understand what's going on in our history, that's how you create a bond. And that's how you get 20, 25, 30, maybe even 35% of the targets from born again Russell Wilson. That's how it happens. And so, not Russell Wilson captain tonight, not Jerry Jeudy in the lineup at all. Courtland Sutton, the optimal captain tonight. All right.
I'm a big Sutton fan as well. I'm all over it. I think it's a great play.
Yeah. Yes. What could go wrong? Okay. That's going to do it for this Showdown show. Appreciate you all being here. If you have not picked up our in-season package yet, it contains everything that you need to win in DFS. All the tables like you see here for every single slate, as well as all the context around it in Cody's articles, all our shows, etc. We do have weekly and monthly options up now on the subscribe page. If you want to check it out, you just go right up here to subscribe on our very professional website. You can check out everything there. All right. For Gary, for Cody, I am Adam. Enjoy the revenge tonight. Good luck, everybody.